The Maya Xibalba, beneath the hills and under the pools, lies Xibalba, the place of frights, a subterranean polity where trickery ruled, maize myths educated, and the hero twins rewrite fate with wit and bold game cunning. In gates and thresholds, caves, rivers, and the mouth of fear. The mouth of Xibalba opens not in a book, but in stone and water. Caves, sinkholes, cenotes, and subterranean rivers are the real doors Maya people crossed, and they needed to speak with what lies beneath. These are places that gather attention, dark, dumb, echoing hollows where echoes answer back, and the map of the world seems to fall. The underworld in Maya imagination is not an abstract void, but a governed landscape, a place with paths, dangers, and neighbors. And you go there by stepping down, not inwards. Think of these cenotes as both wells and letterboxes, holes in the limestone that provide water and traffic for offerings. People threw pots, shells, jade, and sometimes human deposits into these sinkholes as part of a deliberate conversation with the other worlds. Archaeology shows that cenotes were ritual loci, material evidence that grief, belief, and thanks were literally pitched into the liquid seam that links Earth and Xibalba. It is practical theology, a coin in the wishing well, but with considerably higher stakes. The Popol Vuh, that foundational K'iche' narrative, walks this topology like a guidebook. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, descend through cave passages and face rivers and trials in Xibalba. The journey is a mythic map of real seeming thresholds, full of tests, trickery, and theater. The stories treat the underworld as a place with character and etiquette. There are hosts, traps, and a kind of perverse civility to its cruelties. If you're going to negotiate with death, it helps to know who takes the bill. Ritual technology makes the crossing legible. Offerings were composed, arranged, and sometimes sung with care. Ceremonial ascent into caves and ritual placement of grave goods acknowledge the seam between realms. Archaeologists find ceramics, incense residues, and carefully placed objects in cave chambers and cenote deposits. The material traces of people trying to get the etiquette right when addressing subterranean powers. These acts are both devotion and method, a way of signaling, we understand your rules, please do the sensible thing. Topography informs theology. A cave stripping, vault, and the chill of an underground river out of mere backdrops. They shape the stories told about Xibalba's inhabitants and their tests. The landscape supplies obstacles that become more metaphors, narrow passages as trials of resolve, murky pools as thresholds of forgetfulness, and labyrinthine watercourses as the kind of bureaucratic nightmare you only ever meet after the lights go out. The myths preserve those geographies and, in doing so, keep the living mindful of how the world's moisture and stone require respect. There's also a social logic, depositing offerings into cenotes, performing decent rites in caves, or leaving objects at subterranean shrines are acts that bind communities to place and to past. The material offerings are not only for the underworld, they are records for the living, public evidence that a family has kept covenants, that debts to ancestors or subterranean forces have been acknowledged. The ritual is, in effect, local bookkeeping for the metaphysical. Do your part and the village sleeps a little easier. So, picture the sequence. Dawn at a limestone sinkhole, pots glinting like little promises. A torchlit descent into a cave where brave fox and bats complain about the noise. A careful placement of a bow, a pause for one name, and a return to daylight with pockets, lighter, and obligations recorded. The Maya's underworld is not a nihilistic pit, but an address, a place you visit, negotiate with, and occasionally bribe into good behavior. It's practical, proximate, and, if you listen to the stones, surprisingly particular about its table manners. Transit and Psychopomps, trials, trickery, and the bow game of passage. Travel to Xibalba is less a stumble into oblivion and one ill-advised appointment at a very hostile country club, one that specializes in trickdoors and corrosive hospitality. The road to town is already a test. Rivers of scorpions or river of blood, a river of pus, and a crossroad where the roads themselves talk back and try to confuse you. If you survive the approach, you reach the Lord's Console, a room with mannequins to shame unwary guests, and a bench that doubles as a cooking slab for anyone who sits without reading the small print. It is bureaucracy with teeth. The Popol Vuh's procedure for humiliating interlopers is delightfully specific. You see, Xibalba contains a set of deadly houses, each engineered with its own mode of peril. There is the dark house, utterly black, where a torch and a cigar must be used with the skill of a frustrated pyrotechnician. There is the rattling or gold house, where hail and bone-chilling wind buffet the body. There's the jaguar house, whose feline occupants look on diet plans with cruel interests. There is the bat house, full of shrieking, biting things. The razor house, where blades move as though practicing a very sharp dance. And in some tellings, a hothouse of fire. Each chamber is a theatrical test of endurance, wit, or etiquette, designed to kill, humiliate, or expose those who have come ill-prepared. What matters in these trials is not theological condemnation, so much as procedural competence. Xibalba's lords have invented rules and expect you to fail by their rulebook. The point is, if you cannot read a ritual environment, you will be embarrassed, maimed, or worse. The trials function like ritualized gatekeeping. They separate those who carry the correct names, songs, and cleverness from those who do not. It is a mythic way of saying, expertise and knowing the right steps matter. Whether you are crossing a cave mouth or negotiating a very awkward dinner party with the dead. Now, enter Hunahpu and Xibalanque, the hero twins, who approach the underworld's tests with the temperament of professional irritants and the cunning of people who have practiced not getting flummoxed. Where earlier champions of the surface were tricked and destroyed, the twins treat Xibalba's rules as a puzzle to be solved, not a sentence to be endured. They sidestep the mannequins, refuse the cooking bench hospitality, and pass through the houses without omitting the traps. Lighting what needs lighting, naming what must be named, and flipping the Lord's own protocols back on them. Trickery and transformation are their tools. The twins use disguise, mimicry, and ritual knowledge to turn the underworld's devices into liabilities for the hosts. They read signs, improvise counter moves, and, crucially, make the lords of Xibalba fall for their own etiquettes. In the famous board game episodes, The Surfacer's Play, the ancestral pastime that once enraged the lords becomes the ground for reversal. The twins play by the rules, lose spectacularly in public, and then execute a sequence of deceptions and transformations that culminate in the humiliation or destruction of Xibalba's champions. It is less divine wrath than a deft bit of legalese turned slapstick. Know the rules, then weaponize them. Psychopompic technique here is the theatrical and procedural. The underworld is populated by named lords with assigned functions: sickness, pus, bone, cuff, and so on. And the trials test whether a visitor can recognize and respond to each domain. The twins' victory is not merely brute force. It is the exercise of ritual literacy. They name the players, they call the right talismans, they mimic the forms required, and when the moment arrives, they exploit the lord's appetite for spectacle. The tale thereby models what an ideal underworld crossing looks like when intelligence, ritual skill, and narrative cunning are applied. The broader point is practical. Xibalba's challenges teach that the dangerous seam beneath the world is governed and legible. It requires performance, respect, and wit. Myth functions here as a kind of manual for action. If you know the houses, the tests, the names, and the technical fixes, then the underworld is not baffling chaos, but a managed domain where outcomes depend on competence. That is the lesson the hero twins dramatize. And to be fair, it is also a rather serviceable attitude for dealing with very bad neighborhoods of any sort. Now, visually and dramatically, the scenes are delicious. You see, picture torchlight swallowed by a black house, the wind in a rattling house like a chorus of bones, Jagra's eyes reflecting a single unwelcome torch, beds weaning like black punctuation marks, razor blades flashing in corridors whose walls seem to think they have a practical joke to play on anyone who trusts them. Integrate this with the twins' small, sly smiles as they improvise incantations, fashion decoys, and, at a crucial moment, turn the lord's procedure traps into instruments of their own downfall. So, the journey through Xibalba is both perilous and instructive. It insists that passage is an art, a practice of attention, skill, and sometimes cheeky lowering performed before a panel of very old gods who favor riddles and snares. The popular war does not present the underworld as random doom. It presents it as an ordered, treacherous place with rules you can learn to read, and where cleverness, ritual technique, and a painfully decent sense of time may yet get you home in one piece. Horde and Inhabitants, the Lords of Death, their courts, and the nether polity. The Lords of Xibalba are less mythic abstractions and more petty magistrates with exceptionally cruel tastes. Imagine a council of minor functionaries whose portfolios read like a catalogue of discomfort, death, disease, deception, and you have the essence of the nether polity. They sit at ruined benches, set traps with the same practiced boredom a clerk has for paper pushing, and take a particular pleasure in watching mortals fail to read the small prints. Maya narratives give these underworld rulers names and offices. Hunkame and Ukupkame stand as chief figures, 1 death and 7 death, and they preside over a retinue that administers specific torments. But this is not an amorphous doom. Xibalba is regimented, its lords are assigned jurisdictions, and their court runs by protocol. Tests are designed, houses prepared, questions asked. The underworld's cruelty is bureaucratic because it is organized. Its traps are knitted into procedure. In short, Xibalba enacts a strangely domesticized terror. It governs misfortune the way a municipal office governs permits, with formality, an appetite for paperwork, and a fondness for traps behind curtains. Their domesticity is striking. The netherworld in these stories has houses, benches, fields and meals. It mirrors the surface world with an uncanny civility. There are hearths and kitchens, a kind of grotesque mimicry of everyday life. Now, visitors to Xibalba encounter rooms laid out for guests, only to discover that hospitality in the underworld often comes with a clause that includes scissors, bats, or boiling water. The point is theatrical and moral. Human pretension, the assumption that one social skill works everywhere, is exposed and often punished. The underworld's petty rituals mock surface confidence by turning ordinary domestic scenes into tests of endurance and wit. The lords themselves cultivate personalities. They are petty, vain, and invested in the offices. They enjoy ritual protocol the way a magistrate enjoys a gavel. They relish the opportunity to humiliate intruders who fail to observe the etiquette of places where the rules are literal and lethal. Yet, they are also fallible. Their policies are enforceable only so long as visitors cannot read and manipulate the rulebook. The fragility is crucial to the myth. Xibalba's authority is real but conditional, and the stories relish the possibility that a clever challenger might turn the bureaucrats' own procedures against them. And this is where the hero twins, Hunapu and Xibalanke, enter the scene. Equal parts cunning and insolence, they treat Xibalba's laws like a legal brief to be read and exploited, rather than obeyed with meekness. The twins do not simply muscle through, they study the machinery of the court, learn its irony, and then weaponize it. Their victories come from farms as much as force, misdirection, mimicry, and the audacity to treat the law's formalities as opportunities for inversion. In one neat maneuver, the twins submit to the rules of the ball game, only to invert its outcome. In another, they turn the law's devices into their own theatrical props. The message is deliciously pointed. Institutional cruelty, when approached with cunning, can be outwitted by those who know the rules better than the rulers expect. Their court rituals are themselves instructive. Each trap, each mock hospitality, each house that screams with hidden blades is a lesson in attentiveness to place and procedure. The narratives encode a kind of practical pedagogy. Know the houses that has the names of lords and their preferences. Carry the right offerings. Speak the right words. And these tales function as both entertainment and manual, myth rehearsals for how to behave and facing forces that operate like local administrators of comity. Beyond their narrative function, the lords of Xibalba reveal a cultural logic. By personifying death as a polity, the Maya make the frightening familiar and therefore negotiable. They found a danger in an organized world, so that people may imagine remedies, rules, and counters. The underworld's domestic features remind the living that the social world extends into the subterranean. Obligations, etiquette, and reciprocity matter even, perhaps especially, beneath the earth. To dishonor proper procedure is to risk not merely shame, but real harm. To learn the forms is to gain leverage. And there is a moral note that runs beneath the spectacle. Humanity's social institutions, if left unexamined, can become mechanisms of cruelty. Xibalba's bureaucrats are an exaggerated mirror. They show what happens when rule-making loses sympathy and becomes performance. The twins' trickery is therefore not a mere bravado, but an ethical correction, an argument made in story against authority that is unaccountable and delighting in pain. So, the Underworld's court is a theatre of governance, a place where rules, roles, and small cruelties are polished into ritual. It is policed by named lords who relish procedure, and by retinues whose routines make moral testing systematic. And crucially, this polity is trickable, the very features that make it terrifying. Its orderliness, its devotion to ritual form, its confidence in its own procedures, provide the openings for cunning, recognition, and reversal. The lesson left, ringing in the Popol Vuh, is as pointed as it is practical. Know the rules of the place you enter, or be prepared to become the subject of a very long and uncomfortable lecture. Judgment, reward, and cultural function, trials as moral theatre, rebirth, maize, and social memory. Xibalba's courtroom is less a final judgment than one elaborate playroom, where morality, memory, and agriculture are argued through seeds of wit. The Popol Vuh frames the underworld not as an abyss of arbitrary dome, but as a stage where trials teach the living how to be clever, reverent, and useful. When the hero twins beat the Death Lord, they do more than escape. They invert the rules of the place, reclaim potency for the surface, and, crucially, secure maize and the practices that make human life possible. It is a rescue mission with excellent symbolism and spectacular consequences. Imagine the twins standing before a tribunal whose decor, which please a satirist of bureaucracy. Houses built to humiliate, test aside with the smugness of office clerks, and lords who administer pain as if filling forms were an art. The twins do not answer with peers groveling. They answer with trickery, ritual cunning, and performance. Their victories are not mere plot devices, but cultural prescriptions. Outwit cruelty, keep your ritual knowledge sharp, and never accept hospitality from a house that insists you sit first. This mythic rehearsal performs several important jobs. First, it teaches craft. The twins model what success and peril requires. Knowledge of names, of songs, of talismans, and the capacity to improvise under pressure. And these are the skills that real-world ritual specialists and travelers needed when confronting liminal spaces. Caves, cellars, and subterranean currents that are treacherous and require respect. Knowing the proper words and offerings is not superstition in the story. It is survival strategy rendered poetically. Second, the narrative makes cosmic sense of social practice. The twins' overthrow of the Death Lord is read as an origin for key cultural forms. The ball game is not just sport, but a ritualized enactment of cosmic contest. Maize's return to the world is not merely agricultural luck, but a result of cunning enactment against Death's hoarding. The Popol Vuh grounds everyday realities, fields of maize, communal games, funerary rites. In a cosmology that rewards skill and ritual correctness. In doing so, it teaches communities how to read misfortune as an imbalance to be repaired, rather than as random cruelty. Third, the tales institutionalize ritual repair. The memory of Xibalba's test lives on in funerary practices, cave offerings, and in iconography of the ball game. When people throw ceramics or precious objects into cenotes, when they place grave goods in cave chambers, they reenact the covenant the twins established. The living must feed the subterranean powers with respect and exactness, and return the world will yield corn, rain, and continuity. And these acts are practical theology, material gestures that make the invisible contract visible and enforceable. There is also a moral theater at work. The laws of Xibalba relish the humiliation of guests who assume service privileges will translate below. The twin success is therefore a moral fable. Hubris meets procedural savvy and loses. It instructs listeners, especially young men and ritual aspirants, that arrogance is less effective than ritual literacy and careful wit. The Popol Vuh's humor is often dry and tactical. Outwitting death is as much about knowing how to play a small, terrible joke as it is about having supernatural muscle. Agriculture sits at the narrative's heart. Maize is the indispensable companion of Maya life, and the mythic return of maize from Xibalba is symbolic shorthand for ecological renewal. The twins' triumph reorients the subterranean forces from hoarding and obstruction to provision. The story thereby sacralizes maize and situates agricultural success within a more ritual economy. Sowing, harvesting, and seasonality become parts of a covenant that must be kept with subterranean powers, with offerings, rites, and continual memory work. Practically, this logic shaped rituals, ceremonial descents into caves, offerings tossed into sinkholes, and the incorporation of ball game motifs into public ritual are not mere homage to an old story. They are ritual technologies that maintain the balance the myth insists on. When misfortune is read as a symptom of broken ritual obligations, neglected offerings, forgotten names, unperformed rites, the remedy is social and performative. A public reparation, a re-offering in a senate, a remembered recitation. The myth supplies the script, the community supplies the actors. So, in short, Xibalba's judgment stage lessons rather than mete out arbitrary condemnation. The Popol Vuh uses theatrical trials to encode cultural priorities, cunning over brute force, ritual knowledge over arrogant impulse, and the collective care of maize and memory as the foundation of social life. The twins win not simply to survive, but to revite the terms of cosmic hospitality, so that the world above may be nourished and the social fabric remain intact.